Hey guys, I'm Steven Farnsworth.
And I'm Grant Babbitt.
And you're listening to It's a Dad Thing podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to It's a Dad Thing podcast. Steven, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I am good. I actually, you know what? We did last week. I talked about a family adventure we did. We did Jurassic Quest, right? Driving by the dinosaurs. This week we had another family adventure, but at home.
Okay.
Do you know Justin Willimon or Justin Wilmon?
No.
He's okay. If on Netflix at all, if you're a fan of magic, Justin Wilmon does magic for humans.
Oh, I've seen the thumbnail, but I haven't watched the show yet.
Okay. If you haven't watched it, watch it. It's awesome. But he's been doing, ever since quarantine started, he's been doing magic for humans at home. So it's like a Zoom call, live magic show. It's only $25 for like your whole family. And it is worth it. It's worth the hour. It's interactive. Wow. You know, he calls on people. Super fun. We did that yesterday. My kids were like, what? It's the marshmallow guy, which is, if you've seen the show, you'll know what I'm talking about. But
you would get that.
Anyway, super fun.
I drove by the Magic Castle. Does that count as like similar?
Almost.
Okay.
Almost. It kind of does.
I got out into the world a couple days ago and was like actually driving around town. It was like a whole different world. I was like, wow, I actually live in Los Angeles. This is kind of a cool place.
Right. Yeah. It's a funny story. The movie that I'm working on right now, the director of photography actually is a legit magician at Magic Castle. Like he has his card.
Wow.
So yeah, he'll be walking around set and then he'll just do little magic tricks. And you're just like, I could do this all day. Like, why are we making a movie?
Right. What are we doing here?
A lot of fun. All right. Steven, how'd you do? What'd you do over the weekend? Did you do anything fun other than driving by the Magic Castle?
I did. It was my birthday this past weekend. Right. So Saturday was my birthday, turned the big 3-6.
Oh,
I don't know if that really notches me up. And it's just now I'm in my late 30s, I guess I can say.
Yes. Welcome.
Yeah. But
you start losing your hair.
Yeah. and you know, as a dad, my request was that we barbecue for lunch, and I had all the kids outside playing and forced everybody outside the house to hang out while I barbecued. And that was my birthday present for the day. And then Sarah actually took me to the Biltmore Hotel downtown, which is super cool. But it's like half shut down, but it's also half off. So it's kind of a nice little deal.
I was just there a couple weeks ago.
But it's great. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful hotel. But had a lot of fun, made a bunch of hamburgers and hot dogs and hung out over the weekend. But yeah, it was awesome.
Awesome. That sounds fun. Steven, happy late birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And so any of you that are actually watching this as opposed to listening, you're listening to our guest be very, very quiet while we talk to each other, but you're also looking at him go like, what are these guys ever going to introduce me? Evan Chasteen, is it Chasteen?
Chasteen, you got it.
Chasteen. Evan Chasteen is here today. Everybody, welcome Evan Chasteen. Ooh, round of applause. All right.
Thank you.
How you doing, Evan?
Evan and I have known each other for a while now. And we grew up in Oklahoma, and he was actually my younger brother's friend. But we knew each other. We went to the same church and hung out, and I just kind of followed him on social media. And he was I'm so glad that he was able to join us today, because he's got a really cool subject to talk about. But Evan, for those of you that don't know you, just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. My name's Evan, and I'm in Alpharetta, Georgia. That's just north of Atlanta. And I have a daughter. Her name is Olive, and she will be 1 year old on March 17th. I don't know when this is airing, so that's either before or after the air date for this, but very soon. And then my wife is pregnant with our second, and he is due on April 10th. So we will have two kids barely 1 year apart. Yeah, thank you very much. So
that's exciting.
This dad journey is a new thing for me. I'm 11 months into it, and it's been a really thought-provoking. engages different parts of my mind as I think about life and the meaning of life and purpose and all of those things. So I'm excited to be here on the podcast with you guys.
Yeah. And you know what? And welcome. And by the way, you picked a wonderful time to be a dad right in the middle of a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah.
What were you thinking? I mean, come on.
Right.
That's exciting. So wait, so if you had her March 17th, first off, she's a St. Patty's baby, right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
And the joke
exciting.
is if our son comes early and is born on the same date, which is a possibility, we'll have Irish twins.
That's
oh my
that's
gosh.
double Irish.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I mean, as someone who is very, very Irish, I love that. That's super exciting. That's awesome. So Evan, I think that was right after the lockdown, right? Like kind of, I don't know where Georgia was on that, but I know
Georgia was not as early as California.
Okay.
People here didn't take it quite as seriously, but we were in the hospital. Things started changing rapidly. So on March 17th, kind of our first cases or deaths were beginning to pop up here, and they started taking the hand sanitizer and gloves out of the room, saying people were stealing it. It was a weird experience. Excuse me. It was a weird experience in the hospital, and our family wasn't able to be there with us like we had planned them to be able to come in and see. So we had to change our expectations quickly, kind of that day as we went to the hospital.
Was your family back in Oklahoma during all of this, or some in Georgia? I mean, where's everybody located at?
My wife's family is here in Georgia. She's from this area that we live in. She went to high school right down the street, and my family was in town. So our daughter Olive, she came. We went to the hospital on her due date, so it kind of worked out nicely to have people plan to come and be around for the occasion.
Yeah, you had a convenient baby. That's she was very considerate of you guys.
Yes, she has been ever since. She's such a great baby. She's awesome.
That's good. So I'm assuming by now, probably most of your family has gotten to meet her at this point, or anybody not meet her because of COVID stuff, and nobody that would have met her in the family hasn't been able to not meet her. I feel like I'm using a lot of double negatives there. Everybody's met her in the family, so that's good. Don't worry about grammar on this show. We don't. I definitely don't. So you don't have to worry about grammar. Don't worry about it.
That makes me feel at ease.
No. Oh, we're all sorts of backwards here. It's fine. For us, we have almost a 1-year-old. So 11 month, about 11 and a half, right at this point. We have a 9-month-old. So we have all our families back in Kansas. So outside of this house, other than maybe people on the street here or there, or the occasional doctor's visits, I'm pretty sure our baby thinks like this is the entirety of the world, because he's never met anybody in our family at all. And, it's a horrible joke, but we joke about how he's going to be 5 years old by the time he gets to meet, grandma and grandpa. So that's crazy. But I'm really glad you've gotten to, maybe you didn't share the actual birth moment, but I'm glad that you've been able to, share having your baby around your other family. And I mean, it's a really exciting thing that, one, it's going to support you guys immensely. So I'm really excited for that. That's amazing. And having the second baby coming up, that is super exciting. I'm super stoked for you, because you thought it was hard now. Oh, just wait. You're going to have so much fun in the best of ways. Fun.
It's actually kind of like a nice little introduction to be like, and things are changing, because that's just what constantly happens. I mean, it just feels like in each age group, we're tackling different things with different kids, which keeps it exciting. But what I think one of the cool things when you and I were talking, Evan, was you had these thoughts on like the role of a father in a child's life. And I thought it was really interesting. I mean, you even posted about it on your Instagram, a kind of little bit of your thoughts and kind of looking back on your life and how your dad or other dads were in your life and kind of how that's impacted you, but also like fairy tales or mythology or religion, all these kinds of things affect how or kind of give you like an understanding of what might be that role of a father in a child's life. But I just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were. What do you think of whenever I say role of the father in a child's life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Phrasing it that way almost seems unanswerable or like this mystery that we get to play with, right? So I don't want it to seem as though I'm a father of an 11-month-old and I have all the answers to what the role of a father is by any means, but it is something that I've spent time thinking about. And I think during the 9 months of pregnancy leading up to a child's birth, most fathers are thinking about what it means to be a dad and what that's going to look like. So that's where this began. Maybe seriously, I think I've always thought about being a dad, but seriously is whenever I found out my wife was pregnant for the first time, and it's like, okay, now what? This isn't just fun thought experiments anymore. This is going to be reality, and I'll be holding my daughter in my arms soon. And what's the role on a very practical level for me as her father? And then how does that change over time? So that's kind of how I've approached this question. In the role, I'm kind of going to backstep too from answering you directly because we have some time to explore this question.
Yeah.
My spiritual journey and thinking about spirituality and God and journeys and the roles of adventurers or the hero's journey as one that's been impactful by Joseph Campbell. All of these things have influenced what I think my role is as a dad to Olive and soon to be my son who's born in April. And so this journey kind of goes from safety to danger back to safety, or from known to unknown back to known, or from orientation to disorientation back to reorientation, or from life to death to resurrection. So we find these in kind of all stories. And Grant, I don't know exactly what you do, but you mentioned something about working on a movie. So you're probably familiar with these themes. And Stephen, I know you work in the film industry as well, so you're familiar with these themes. We find them in movies, and it's really fun finding them in kids' movies. And I'm revisiting all these children's movies, and I have a new sort of fascination as a father, looking for what is the dad doing and how are the kids interacting with their parents. So this is a long-winded way to say this post that you're talking about that I made on Instagram started with this sentence: to choose danger, we must first know safety. So there's a part of what I see my role as a father to allow my children to know what safety is, so that whenever they choose danger, they're ready to choose danger.
So, Evan, what's funny about that is that coming from film and working in film for so long, you're saying, to know safety, to know danger, you need to know safety, right? Well, what we're taught in filmmaking is there's an old rule is that you need to learn the rules before you can break the rules, right? There's a reason why people aren't, as filmmakers, they go out there and they just make movies, right? And they just go, okay, I'm just going to make this and I'm not going to shoot it a certain way. There's a reason why there's a beginning, middle, and end, right? There's structure. There's a reason why those rules are there. And when those rules are there and people understand those rules and the filmmakers understand those rules, then we can get something beautiful, right? We can get a filmmaker that does a shot or does a scene or does something that we've never seen before. But that's only because we've understood what those rules are and we're all playing by the same game, right? And then someone goes, I'm going to slightly change it, knowing that I can still fit this in with all the other rules, but I'm going to change this one thing, right? So that saying and that phrase that we have in the film industry and storytelling, right, is something that I think relates immediately to what you're talking about with kids. Because clearly, if my kid didn't know the rules of riding a bike, I'm not going to put him on a two-wheeler and go, hey, go ahead, you got this, right?
Sure.
But what we're going to do is we're going to start with the training wheels. We're going to go 2 wheels. We're going to go, okay, I'm going to hold the back of the bike. Okay, here's what you want to do. Here's how you balance. You're going to walk them through all of these rules, right? Once they know how they can do it safely, is what I'm assuming kind of what you're saying, right? Is once they know that, they can then choose, hey, I'm going to ride a bike. They may not have any idea how dangerous that really is. Okay. They may not know that they can, like what I did when I was a kid is I went down a giant hill. I hit a rock and I flipped over a rock and I happened to land in a nurse's front yard. Okay, this is a different time, but that nurse came out, she took care of me, and then called my parents, was like, hey, your son's at my house, he flipped over his bike. I'm not going to tell my kids that when you get on a bike, you may just flip over the front handlebars. Sure. Because I want them to understand how to do it safely first. But I think if I'm lining that up the right way, that sounds a lot like what you're saying is, that example of, hey, we teach them how to do something. We teach them the rules, like in filmmaking. We show them safety. We make them feel safe, know that they're comforted. And then they can go, you know what? I'm going to step outside of that comfort and I'm going to try something new. And that's that danger element that you're talking about. Does that sound about right? Or am I just totally off base here?
No, yeah, it does sound right. And the photo that I posted that with sounds, it's a different version of your bike story, essentially. I'm standing on the beach looking out over the ocean, holding my daughter, and we're both facing the ocean. We're both facing the ocean. So in that image, I see me and I see her and I see the unknown, the ocean representing this thing that if she were to just crawl out there into the ocean, that's very dangerous, and I'm not going to let her do that, right? Mm-hmm. But that also doesn't mean that she never gets to go in the ocean, and even for a while it'll only be get in the ocean while I'm there, and then one day she's going to get in the ocean without me there, and that's okay. So it's learning this. How do I navigate when those lines are crossed as a dad? This is the question I don't have the answer to. Mm-hmm. And seems to metaphorically apply to more than just physical things that we're telling our children they can and can't do. So if I see that as my role is to set these safety boundaries, knowing that one day they're going to cross it, get on the bike, go down the hill, whatever it may be, that they're doing that, and what does then my role become? Because I'm still, and I'm jumping way ahead in years, but I'm still Olive's father. So if a father role is a father, it seems like there's evolution to it somehow. But yeah, the image of me holding my daughter at the ocean, on the beach, looking out over the ocean, is what that represents to me.
I 100% understand that. And that's that. You know what? Here's the question I have for you is, not only, because don't get me wrong, Steven and I do not ever claim to be experts on this show, right? We are dads that are trying. And I loved what you were saying about how, I know you were talking about spiritual journey, but you're talking about that journey of the known and unknown, the disoriented and oriented. Well, I think I can probably speak for all of us, but at least for myself, I've been disoriented so many times as a dad that, it's so hard to walk through life as a father and know that you are responsible for this child or these children, and know that you are this greater force in their life, that you are the one and only, out of all the people that are in the world, of all the people, you are that one person in that world that is that person's father, right? You're a protector. You're all of these things. You're the guidance. You're the teacher. You're all of these things to this person. And it's so disorienting at times when you have those moments of, okay, I think I got this, right? When you've probably experienced this in that 11-month phase where you've been like, okay, I've got her sleep cycle down. I've got this. We know she naps at this time. And then all of a sudden she goes, nope, not anymore, right? Whatever you thought you knew, you don't know anymore. And then she sleeps at a different time, or then she takes naps differently, or then whatever. And then she goes, I don't want to nap anymore. And you have to experience all of that and go, I thought I knew this. I thought I had this down. And now all of a sudden I don't. And to me, that's what you're talking about, this disorienting sensation, because for me, I didn't realize that my parents didn't know what they were doing until I had kids. And then I went, my parents had no idea what they were doing. They're just trying to figure it out. Right. That is us on a daily occurrence. So the fact that you are thinking about this and you only have an 11-month-old compared to they're 10 now, and you're going, gosh, I should really figure this stuff out. That's admirable. And I think I think that really takes a lot. I mean, look, Steven and I are a couple of dads that we've talked about this. And the whole reason we started this podcast was because we talked about not knowing what we're doing. And what are you doing? Well, I'm doing this. What are you doing? Well, let's try this thing. I don't know if it's going to work. And then I'm so excited for you to find this out, but you cannot parent both of your kids the same way. That's going to be fun. That's going to be so fun.
Yeah.
Because they too, I mean, I guess it's a possibility they could have very similar personalities, especially if they're Irish twins. I guess that's possible. But I have 4 kids, and so far we haven't figured out the full personality of our 9-month-old. But I will tell you, so far of the 3, no one is the same. They are completely different, and I cannot dad them the same, right? So I love that idea of trying to. I don't know everything, but I'm going to try, right? So here's my question for you, because you mentioned looking at dads and like literature and spirituality. Stephen and I we're movie fans, we're TV fans. Like, this is where we come from. I want to pose this question. I'll pose it to you, Evan, but also to you, Stephen. What dads in like a movie or a show, because you said you've been watching these old kids shows, the kid movies. Yeah. What are you seeing that is like representative as a whole of these dads? And then are there any dads that are out there in movies or something you go, you know what, I want to be like that one. I want to do some of the things that dad does. So I know that may be a loaded question, or it may be very easy, but it's kind of a 2-parter. So what do you see as dads as a whole? And then what are some of those like few dads in movies, TV, literature, whatever, that you go, you know what, I want to take from them. I want to do what they're doing and try that in my own life.
Yeah, gosh, one of the first scenes that comes to mind, and I would probably say is one of my favorites, is The Lion King, and it's Mufasa and Simba. And Simba's line, if you will, Simba's boundary, the rule that's in place is to not venture out beyond the Pride Land. And that's something that Simba does. He ventures out into the unknown, and there's this journey out and this journey back home, as all journeys have, is a journey away from home and a journey to home. And Mufasa so graciously just walks with Simba and explains the cycle of life. Whenever Simba does that, it wasn't something that Mufasa saw. This is my interpretation, if you'll allow me. I see Mufasa saying, okay, now Simba's ready. And it wasn't Simba's in trouble. It wasn't I'm going to bring down the wrath of Mufasa, the king of the jungle. It was, let's go have a talk. And I'm gonna share some things with you that you weren't ready to hear yet, and now I know that you're ready to hear these things. But it was with love, and it was with grace, and it was very respectable. And I hope to handle the situation whenever my children venture out beyond into the unknown with a similar finesse and wisdom.
One of my favorite things about that is how that conversation starts, right? The part of the conversation that I remember that whole thing with Mufasa, right? Well, one of my favorite lines is when Mufasa turns to Zazu and he says, "Zazu, take Nala home. I need to teach my son a lesson." And then there's this like crouch of Simba, because he's like preparing himself for this, like, oh God, here comes that wrath, right?
Gives me goosebumps. You just telling the story again, man.
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, I'll joke with my boys, because I have a girl and a boy. And so I'll joke with my daughter, like, you need to go over there. I need to teach my sons a lesson, because I love Lion King as well. And so, but what I like about that is the transition from, hey, I'm just going to like get onto you or have some quick discipline, to, I think I don't think you fully understand what's going on here. And it's that kind of guidance, like that kind of transition from harsh discipline of, hey, you cross that line, here's that discipline, and we're done. Which sometimes I feel like as dads, I know I sometimes get in that mode where it's like, I told you, come on over here, here's your discipline, right. But it's that finesse. And I think it's that kind of intuitiveness of Mufasa to be able to, like, I don't think you quite understand. You're still young. And so you just think, I'm just going to do what dad doesn't want me to do,
Right.
And then he kind of transitions
Simba had
into
to
that.
have broken the rules before too, right? To that crouch that he gives Mufasa, right, came from a place of, I've been in trouble before. And Mufasa in this situation all of a sudden handles it differently. So there's this wisdom that comes with it that I pray for or hope that I can live up to, where the difference in the situations, and whenever it is a time to further just like you're just in trouble, or I don't know what that looks like yet, because I just have an 11-year-old, so that's me speaking out of turn. But there does come the time, like when do you know when that situation is, and you're so right. The we need to have a talk is a different way of handling it.
It is, and I think like and it's not always a talk, and it's not always that long, because I can even tell with my kids, like even though I have 10 right now, 10, 8, and 7, that I can tell when I lose them, right? I can tell, oh, I've gone the dad, like we're starting to ramble, dad, like they've tuned out at this point, right? Like,
totally, yeah.
And there is sometimes of those things where there are, I think for me as a dad, I think what I try to balance and don't always get right is that when do you let them learn that lesson the hard way, and when do you catch them before they do that, right? And I feel like when the kids are super little, it's almost like 100% or 90%, you're going to catch them before they do that, right? You're going to catch them before they touch that iron, or before they smack their head on that corner, or when they're walking, you know what I mean? Like, because you're constantly like, oh my gosh, they have no idea where they're going or what they're doing.
Right.
And then as they get older, there's some things that are like, okay, they might need to learn their own lesson the hard way with that. And so I'm going to just kind of allow that to happen. And because I'm still creating that safety boundary, right? That kind of what you've talked about, where it's like, I have a really interesting story. It's sort of on topic, but I want to share it because we talk about sharing our stories and stuff like that. And it's this week. I love taking my kids on walks with bikes. And it's our neighborhood's not very big. I grew up in a massive neighborhood, and this one's like super small. So it's like, take the 3 kids out on bikes. I'm walking the dog. We've set up this routine. Everybody knows where they're going. We're all riding bikes. Everything's good. But right before we go, my wife, Sarah, is like, can you just not have like an accident or something? Every time they go out there, they come back with like a bum knee, or they're bleeding, or somebody hit a car, or, you know what I mean? It's like, she's like, can you just not? And so I'm like, you got it. I am on it. I am fully engaged. So I was like constantly watching where they go, giving guidance, like, okay, guys, that's too close to cars, like doing the whole dad guidance thing as we go. And literally my son is on the sidewalk. He's on a bike on the sidewalk. He's not even in the street. He's wearing his helmet like he should. And he's like following his sister. And I'm about 50 feet away from them, behind them. And he's like going really slow. And I kid you not, it was almost like out of this like funny YouTube video that he just like, he's riding beside this like brick wall. And he just like bike falls, and he just like lunges towards this brick wall. And he like smacks his face on it and like falls down on the ground. And I'm like, I'm like looking around like, did somebody prank me? Like, what just happened? He looked like he leaped out of the bike, and so he's got like this bloody mouth. And we end our thing early, and we walk, all the kids back inside, and Sarah's like, oh my gosh, like what is going on now? And I'm like, it's fine. He just hit his mouth a little bit. Well, he actually chipped his tooth.
Oh,
and he has Invisalign in, which is like, he's got these plastic pieces over his teeth, and he was wearing a helmet, and somehow he still chipped his tooth. And we took him to an emergency dental visit, and like the dentist was like, well, thank God he had the Invisalign in and he had the helmet on, because the helmet stopped him from like really hitting the wall hard. And I was just like, even whenever I was fully engaged And I was like, they're on the sidewalk. We got safe parameters. Like what's the worst going to happen? Well, apparently I found out, but it was still like once everybody settled down, right? It was like, okay, well, I was okay with that because I set up the big perimeter, right? So like, even if like that's the worst that could happen, I'll live with that, right? But what I can't live with is me being reckless and they're out in the street and a car comes by, right? Because then that's like you're upping the risk of that. And so I think that's kind of where I thought about this when we were kind of talking and getting ready for this, was that kind of dad perimeter, right? Where it's kind of like you're letting them play in this zone depending on how old they are, and you're kind of invested, but you're kind of knowing what each kid's strengths and weaknesses are, and you're trying to kind of just build up this perimeter for them to live in. And you kind of make that perimeter larger and larger the older they get.
I love that story that you told. And it is always a good reminder to know that no matter how many boundaries we put in place, there's only so much control we have over any given situation.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So I've got a few more. I love the detail that you pulled out of Mufasa. So there's Moana venturing out into the ocean. Her father set up the boundary, not only for her, but for the entire community, that they don't venture out beyond the reef, right? So there's a right. father figure for an individual, but also as a leader of a community, there was a father figure for the entire community, setting this boundary. And Moana, goes out beyond the reef, as all heroes do. They venture into right. the unknown, and her father greets her with love and joy whenever she returns as well, because he knows that it was a necessary thing to do. So there was no cowering coming back to the father, and I don't know that they have a specific scene, but it's a joyful celebration that Moana is back and she saved the day. Stop me on any one of these. I'm just going to go down a kind of a list. Is that okay to do?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So then Frozen, Elsa using her superpowers. It was like, don't use your superpowers. And then accidentally, oh my gosh, I hit Anna using your superpowers. Her dad, this was an intriguing one actually to think through. So her dad, they kind of separated the two for a little while out of safety for both. And then eventually how did they come back to, how did Elsa get back out of that room? You guys may have seen the movie more times than I have at this point.
Well, I've definitely seen the movie more times than you have. Let me just be clear. So are you talking purely Frozen 1, or are we going to Frozen 2 territory too?
Let's go both. Frozen 2, I like the format of that journey better than Frozen 1, but they do mingle a little bit as well.
Yeah, so Frozen 2 obviously does a lot of callback in Frozen 1, right? But
yes.
What happens in Frozen 1 is Elsa accidentally, hits Anna with her frozen power, right? And she gets the white streak in her hair and they need to heal her. And what happens is, for her own safety, Elsa is put in her own room, right? And that's the whole song of like, do you want to build a snowman? Right? Because she just wants her to come out and play. And here she is there, aging up through that process, right? Just wants her to play. Parents say, hey, nope, not safe. Can't be out of here. Also, what if the townspeople see what our daughter can do? And she doesn't come out, essentially. I mean, I'm sure she comes out to go to the bathroom. But, like in a sense of like coming out and not living in the room is once her parents die, she has to take over as the queen of Arendelle. Right. So that's Coronation Day, and they have Coronation Day, and Anna's so excited to have the castle open. I'm just telling you the whole thing of the movie. That's great.
Right. No, this is great. This is great.
But I mean, yes, when you're talking about, father figure, it really, what's interesting is that that was like her parents were a figure together. And in Frozen 2, her mom they realized like the story of her mom and dad was so important because that actually brought two tribes of people together. And so if you do or don't remember that, by the end of that, basically you realize that Anna and Elsa both have their own superpowers, right? And they're really the yin to the yang. Right. And so mom and dad were able to create these children based out of their love of two opposite sides, and created two children that have two opposite powers that of course work together. So I don't know if that's where you're going with that.
No,
but let me
that's
just,
great.
If you want to know Frozen inside and out, I'm your guy. Okay.
I love it.
Well,
So
we should
I've
just
seen
say
it.
like a blanket spoiler alert for any of the movies, but we just assume
that's true.
The movies that we're showcasing, if you're a dad of a kid that's alive, we're assuming that you've seen these movies by this point.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that's a great point. So this actually is a father figure that maybe I fear being, as the parent walking the child into the room, knowing that in the story still plays on. So I don't want to be the dad that locks the room and then dies, and then the child comes out. So there, I don't know if that plays into the whole father's journey thing, but there is a lot of fear of being that. And not knowing when that Mufasa moment is. So anyways, there's that one.
There's also, to piggyback with that thought, there is a great short on Disney Plus called Wind. And that's very similar in the point that you're trying to make, as far as the dad is with his son, and his son can like basically fly. But he keeps trying to strap him down, because he's afraid of what everybody else says. So he's like putting rocks in his backpack, and he's like trying to do all these things to keep him down. And I believe it's called Wind. So that might be wrong.
Yes.
But,
it's called Wind.
But it's a similar story, right? Where it's like, you don't want to like tell a kid that, hey, like you don't fit in, or you don't do these things well, or you do things that harm or whatever. So we're going to shut you out of the family, or we're going to hide everything, and you can't talk about that or do that thing. Right.
It's like the role of the evil stepmother in a lot of fairy tales, that trying to keep, all right, Grant, long hair.
You're talking about Rapunzel.
Rapunzel, yes.
Yeah.
So Rapunzel,
in the tower.
She's locked in the tower, and so you don't want to play the evil stepmother type character or parent figure. So there's one. Finding Nemo, he ventures out too far from the reef, and his father's reaction is one of love and compassion, and he goes in search of Nemo, and it's a beautiful response to a child venturing out beyond the boundary that's been set. I see. So that's maybe one that I strive for or want to work towards having as a reaction whenever my children venture out beyond.
You know what's great about Finding Nemo is not only does Nemo get to venture out and be on his own, but it's also a story about dad being able to give up some of that trust, or like going like, okay, you're out there, and he's going, you just can't do it. You can't do it, Nemo. You can't. I know you can't do it. And he's talking to Dory, right? And he realizes by the end, not only can I trust my son, but I can trust myself. I don't have to be afraid of all this stuff that I'm personally afraid. And we talked about that last week on our episode, talking about being a dad out of fear, right? Yeah. Is that, if we're neurotic and we're doing our neurotic things and that's what we're modeling for our kids, well, they're only going to see that and think that's how we live our lives. So, I think it's a great story, not only for Nemo, but also for Marlin, and which is a great name for a clownfish, but for Marlin to understand that, he can also do it. He can let him go. He can be brave on his own. I think it's a great example.
Speaking
I totally
of brave,
forgot about that movie.
Yeah, no, that's great. So speaking of brave, Merida's parents keep her from. I guess they're trying to get her to do something actually that she doesn't want to do. So her version of venturing into the unknown is kind of an opposite. It's like, you're setting my boundary way out here, but I don't want to go to that boundary. And she follows a wisp into the forest. So she's not allowed. If I remember right, that forest is off limits because of what's the bear's name? Duke, Marmaduke, something like that.
I don't remember the bears.
Something like that.
It's like the magical powers and stuff, though, right? That are out there that you're not.
Yes, yeah. Well, there's the witch.
The evil bear, and then the witch. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not supposed to go in there because of the evil bear, and the father's known. Oh, this brings up another point that I wanted to make, or a topic to bring up. The father oftentimes sets the boundaries because he knows the danger. So in Brave, he's fought the bear, and the bear, I think, got the best of him, and he got the best of the bear, and they're like enemies now. And so the reason you're not supposed to go into the forest is because the dad knows what's out there. Like, it's a good reason that the boundary's there. And she ends up venturing into the forest anyways, and kind of beginning that journey.
Yeah. And I think it's a great, very applicable to us as fathers, because, look, if I got in a car every day and I never got in a car wreck, I probably wouldn't be scared of car wrecks. But I've been in a car wreck, and I know that sucks. I know there's things that, like, whether it's insurance or whether it's you could hurt yourself, you could hurt other people. There's so many things that could go wrong. That's why I go, oh, you know what? That could be bad. And that's where my fear comes from, right? Otherwise, yeah, go drive as fast as you want. Who cares? It's fun. Like, of course, that's us as dads, right? We're generally, we fear the unknown, but we also fear the, oh crap, this happened to me before. I want to make sure that you can live your life without going through the same junk that I went through. Right. So yes, it's the broken down in Brave. Don't mess with the bear. The bear could damage you. Okay. Don't mess with the bear.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
So I guess my question in knowing this, and my motivation and even wanting to dive into this, is, does knowing the Father's journey help me as a father? And I don't have the answer to this yet. I hope 18 years from now, or 25 years from now, or 30 years from now, I have an answer to this question. But my question is, does knowing the Father's journey, does knowing the structure of story help me in my journey as a father?
Steven, you want to tackle that one?
I mean, I feel like it does. I feel like anytime, so like I watch movies, especially even with my kids now that they're a little bit older, and I'm like constantly quizzing them, right? I'm constantly quizzing them on, like, I'll just like pause the movie. I'll be like, okay, what's going on here? All right.
Oh, you're that kind of dad.
And I'm like, I'm that dad, right? But what I'm trying to get out is, I'm trying to get them to think, and I'm trying to get them to open up their brains a little bit, and not just be consuming, but like understand what these people are trying to tell them, right?
That's
like,
such a dad thing.
I know, but we just finished WandaVision, and it was so fun because, like, we got to. It's a great show, which Grant, our beloved Grant, has worked on and was awesome. But it's definitely a show I recommend. But it's like, it's knowing, to me, knowing those stories is another way to relate. It's another way to either know that, hey, other people have been through this, or know, to give me ways to explain things. And so what I use story a lot right now in my parenting, or in my being a father, is I will even literally just talk to them about those stories and say, hey, like, and correlate those to maybe something we're talking about. Right. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but like for me, that helps me give a kind of like a somewhere to, like an anchor, right? Like, it helps me with an anchor. So like, even when we talked about WandaVision, we were able to talk about, well, who is Vision, right? That was one of my kids, like, one of my kids said, who is Vision and how was he created? And I was like, oh man, you really need to know your stuff, right? Like, you gotta, this is no easy thing to accomplish. But what I liked about it is that I was able to talk about, yes, and kind of align the different story points to, why did this person do this? What was the point of doing that? Or Jarvis, Iron Man had Jarvis just like we have Siri, how do we use that thing? And so I'm just constantly trying to find ways to correlate that, because to me, that's the power of story, is that way of it. It comes from either joy or fear or some kind of meaning, right? So that's kind of where I use it. But what about you, Grant?
Well, I think that's a great answer, but let me just clarify something. Siri is nothing like Jarvis to me, because I ask Siri stuff and then she goes, why don't you just Google it? And I'm just like, what? Why Siri? Like, can you just Google
Here's
it for
4
me?
articles for you to read. I don't want to know that.
Yeah,
just
don't send me to the
answer.
Wikipedia. Come on, Siri. You're AI. What's going on? So slightly different than Jarvis, but yeah, I get what you're saying. Good example. No, I mean, for me, yes, I think it's a great, like you said, anchor. I think for me, yeah, it's a wonderful anchor. It's also one of the things that, when you think of a hero's journey and you think of being a father, I mean, there is no way of being a father without dealing with immense pain. right? And I don't mean that in like it's a negative way. Like it's not like you shouldn't deal with this pain as a father, but you got to understand that we have essentially someone that comes into the world, or in my case with 4 kids, many someones who come into the world, and you watch them grow up way faster than you want them to. Okay. I'm sure your 11-month-old just felt like she was a month or 2 old, like last week.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And next thing you know, they look like you did when you were 20, and you're just like, what happened to the time? Right. And so there's this pain of pain, which is, I love that you quoted WandaVision, because when Vision says in one of the episodes, and I'm not giving anything away, but he says, what is pain if not persevering?
Love persevering.
It was such, love persevering. Such a wonderful line. Like that is honestly, I know I worked on the show and I'm super partial to it, but that I had nothing to do with that part. And that was so good. Like that is just a quote that I think sums up not only dealing with pain, but also just being a father, because you watch these children grow. They constantly they tell you no. They tell you, Dad, I don't love you. You know, at some point they're teenagers and they hate your guts and they don't think you're cool and your jokes aren't funny anymore. Like those are all things that are possible and the things that can happen. However, you love them so much that you will do anything. You will die for them. You will do so much for your children. And so the amount of pain that we feel in watching someone grow and be hurt, it's that idea of our heart being outside of our body. Right? We're watching someone deal with pain, whether they're having a tough day at like elementary school or whether they're breaking up with a fiance when they're older, right? Something didn't go right, or they're going through a divorce. You're watching your grown children go through divorce. That is pain that you will go through as a father. But our job and our that sense of a hero's journey is that we are always there to fall on our sword for them, right? We're always there to pick them up. We're always there to be that Otis, it's the strong arm. I don't know what, but it's like, the guiding force. Like we walk our daughters down the aisle, right? That is us. That's us in a nutshell. That is what we do. That's what's expected of us. And a lot of times there aren't necessarily a lot of dads that feel that is their responsibility. But if you strive for that and you mess up, that's okay. But if you strive for that and you try for that and you try to be that superhero when you're just a human, that is you doing everything that you can as a father and showing love and being a hero to no one else but that child you're being a hero to. And, for me, when I think of hero's journey, I look, I'm not a superhero. I wish I was Vision and I could like phase through stuff and I could like be Superman and be super strong and do all the stuff. I wish I could turn back time. There's so many things I wish I could do, but really what I can do is I can be their best friend, their teacher, their protector, and I can always be there to have their back. And that's, to me, that is the father's journey and the hero's journey all wrapped in one. That's what that means to me.
Yeah. I really like, sorry.
No, go for it.
I really like that picture you painted, and I can't help but think that there's a next step to it too. So all of those things, yes. So I lost my mom. I know this isn't my dad, but I lost my mom when she was 48 years old. So younger than you're supposed to lose a parent. So I can't help but, as you're saying all these things, say, but there does come a day when I won't be there. Yeah. And that's like a part of this pain that I think you're getting at, that yes, we are there. We are standing with them. We'll fall on the sword. We'll do all of these things until we don't. And like, how do you reconcile that? Like the father's journey, the hero's journey, they both end in this death, or all of our lives as humans. And I don't mean to put a weightiness on this. I just can't help but think about these things as you're saying these things. They're like, so I see one of my duties is to prepare my children for my death, for the day whenever I'm not there.
That is spot on. And first of all, I'm very sorry that you went through that with your mother, because that is a horrible thing to go through. And I'm very sorry that you've went through that. And I will say, I'm sure, I know that was probably a great deal of pain that you went through, but then to now put that on you being a father and you projecting this could happen to me and my children and what would happen, that is That is, yes, that's right there with that's what I'm talking about, pain. And like you're talking about, we're not trying to get sad. We're not trying to be morbid. We're not trying to say like
Right.
it's all doom and gloom. But one of the things that I tell my kids almost every time whether it's like I'm going to go to work for like a whole week and not be here. And when I say be gone at work for a whole week, I mean like they don't see me until like Sunday to Sunday. Like they just, I'm gone before they wake up. They are asleep when I come home. It's like I very rarely see them. One thing that I tell them constantly is, even if I'm not here, where am I? And they say, you're in our heart. And so that's the one thing that I always reiterate with them. Look, even if I'm not here, even if I'm not physically here because I'm at the store or because I'm at work or because I'm, somewhere working far away, or if I'm gone and I'm not coming back, I am always in your heart. And I think that's one thing that, as his dads, and what comes with that pain is that we know that that day will come.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you are thinking about that and you are preparing for it probably means that in a practical sense, you're going to set up life insurance. You're going to set up a will, a living trust. You're going to set up who's going to take care of your kids afterwards. Like these are all practical things that we do. But then on the other part is you're going to try to instill your memory and who you are each day you're with them. And what dad do you want to be? Do you want to be that dad who yells and gets mad? I've had those days for sure. I have a lot of those days. But the days that I want them to remember, I don't have control over it in their mind. So the best that I can do is try to instill that through my actions. I want to be the dad who's silly with them. I want to be the dad that when they're scared, I'm there for them. I hold them. I tell them stories. I make up stories and I make sure they're involved. Like that's the dad I want to be. That's who I want to be remembered, because that thought that you're talking about and that fear of I won't be there someday, I can tell you, I think about that almost every day, if not every day. So you're definitely not alone in that thought by any means. And no, I don't think it's morbid. I think what it is you're saying, look, I'm their protector. So how can I protect them if I'm not here? Right. So
yeah, what you're saying reminds me again of Mufasa. Steven, what does he say to Simba whenever they're looking at the stars? You quoted the line so well from the beginning of their conversation. It's a beautiful scene where he's doing what you're talking about, Grant. He's looking at the stars and saying, I will always be with you. Mm-hmm. And we know the story too, where he isn't physically with him, and that sends Simba out on another journey into the unknown, where he does again come home, but his father was still there he was still there on that journey, even whenever he wasn't physically there on the journey with him. But yeah, that scene, Mufasa you're doing what he is doing in the movie by telling your kids that he'll always be there even when you're not physically there.
Well, I'm very glad you said that, because my kids got me a Mufasa and Simba shirt that says dad goals on it. And now when I wear that, I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's right.
I think
for sure.
Totally. I want that shirt now. I'm going to Google it, Amazon it, whatever. I'm going to have to get that shirt.
It's good. So, okay.
Well, and I think one of the other important things to remember when talking about subjects like this, of like, hey, here's all these other dads or other stories where, dads were shown in different lights, right? And either they were there, they weren't there, or they did something heroic, or they were the one holding everything back. I think for me, the big thing is to remember to be yourself, right? To be who you are. So like for you, Evan, and for you, Grant, you guys are going to be different dads than I am, even if we're given the same information, because we're different people. And I think the times that I've tried to be somebody because like I had this in my head that, hey, I have to be this way. And so I forced my way into trying to be that person, really backfired. Right. But if it's an extension of who I am, or if I'm just being more aware of what's going on, or more intentional with what I'm doing, that's always paid way bigger dividends. Like one of the things that I remember, my kids are still, on the little end, but not super little, but they started playing sports, right? And they started being on teams. But I was like, I coached my daughter's team. She's my firstborn, but I didn't coach my boys' team. And I really regretted that, right? Like but my intent was, my dad was a coach all growing up. I want to give them like an experience where I'm just a fan and I'm just like cheering them on. And then I realized, like, my wife was like, don't like after the season was like, don't you want to coach them next year? And I was like, yeah, I do actually. And she was like, why haven't you? And I was like, I don't know. I just didn't want to be like that, like over helicopter parent or something. Like I had made this thing up in my head of like, I'm don't want to fall into that trap of being like the dad that's like, you have to be a basketball player, and so I just wanted to cheer them on and make sure they were having fun. But then what I was losing was part of that, part of me. Like basketball is my favorite sport. It's it's a big joy in my life. And I was realizing that, oh, I'm like not necessarily stealing joy away, but I'm not fully being myself. And so it's really hindering actually my relationship with my kids, because they're not actually getting the full joy of potentially playing sports or whatever they want to, because they don't see my passion, right? I've like cut myself off somehow because I was trying to keep things like in some kind of special world, that I had thought up in my head. So
yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, so we talked about. Is there any more? First of all, Evan, do you have any? This is a great list, but do you have any other list of like dads you're thinking of? Because I might have some more movie dad related questions here.
They're not movies. I've got a couple more that maybe are books I've read. So one would be from the Bible, the prodigal son, the father, maybe the most famous story of a father. But the son leaves, comes back greeted with a party instead of a punishment. There's very
different from the Fox show Prodigal Son. Very different. Have you heard of this show?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'm just going to share it with you just because it's completely different, but also similar.
Why would they name it? You got to tell me why they named it that too. Then.
Okay, then because I think the idea is that they're basing it off of that story.
Okay.
But what's happening is that the father was a serial killer. So first, right off the bat, it's a little different.
Twist.
But little twist. Right off the bat, yeah, the father is a serial killer. The son was raised knowing that his dad was a serial killer, becomes a detective, right? And okay, so dad, I hate my dad. He's a bad guy. I'm going to do everything opposite to be a good guy. And then what happens is he comes back to dad, and dad helps him solve homicide cases.
Does the son know dad's a serial killer? You said that. He did know that. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, like think like in the news, everybody knows he's in in prison kind of serial killer. Not like he's like did a little time and now he's out and it's like, oh, dad was gone. No. Dad was not at Sandals. Dad is actually here and he's locked away in prison. So yeah, I think that's the idea, is that dad came back, or a son came back to dad, and now here they are working together, instead of like
little twist,
not liking each other. They're working together for good. So there you go. Not quite the same. But irony. No. Irony is funny. I like irony.
My wife got me a book called To Me, He Was Just a Dad. And it's stories of children talking about their fathers who were either celebrities or well-known in some way. And one of the ones in that book was the child of a serial killer. And they wrote about being a detective. So it was a true story. They didn't know their dad was a serial killer, but they ended up becoming a detective, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Anyway, that reminded me of a real life scenario and a pretty good book too. To Me, He Was Just a Dad, something like that. But it's a great read for whenever you're alone for 5 to 10 minutes at a time, once a day.
Okay. Don't know when that'll be, but yes, I appreciate the recommendation.
Yes. And then Iron John is one from the Grimm Brothers fairy tales. The main character here sets Iron John free. The key was hidden under his mother's pillow. He had to go get the key, set Iron John free, went into the wilderness with him. The father and mother end up attending his wedding late in the fairy tale towards the end. I think the last scene of the fairy tale is a wedding, and the father and mother attend, and they're proud of their son. So that was another good one. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. The son very defiantly. So they're living in this community. The father is a spiritual leader looking to attain enlightenment and teach his son the ways of attaining enlightenment. The son sees that all of these men have not actually attained enlightenment, and he feels that he knows everything that they know because they were good teachers. As a compliment to them, like, you've taught me everything you know. You haven't achieved this thing you're trying to teach me to get, so I must journey off on my own to go find this. And the father's initial reaction is no, and Siddhartha stands in the same spot in the living room for like 2 days straight until the father comes in and is like, this is something you really want, isn't it? And he's like, yes. So then he goes off on this journey, and they're never to see each other again. But the father almost had this testing of his son's will to see if it was what he really wanted. There wasn't just an immediate give in. There was a there was a back and forth of getting to know his son in the process and seeing what his son really wanted, and then giving him his blessing to never again see. So gosh, you talk about the pain of being a father. That one would be really tough. But yeah, so those are the other ones just for my list that I kind of threw together before we got on the podcast here.
No, that's a wonderful list, and I've never heard of that. I never heard of the story. Is Siddhartha?
Siddhartha, yeah. Have you heard of Hermann Hesse? He's an author from not in our lifetime, but German. And I'm reading another one of his novels right now. It's Steppenwolf. It's very spiritual journey in nature.
Got it. And Steppenwolf, not the same as the 60s, 70s band Steppenwolf.
No, although that is, I think, the first thing that comes to the Google whenever you search it.
Because I know that. I don't know the novel, but I know Steppenwolf, the band. You know what? I've heard of him before. I couldn't tell you that I've sat and read through the novels, but it sounds very interesting. It in a weird way, it makes me think of, and it's, again, not extreme, but I wanted to quit football when I was a kid. I started in fourth and fifth grade. And I just remember being like, Dad, like, I'm coming home every day with bruises on my arms. And I was like, I just don't like this. Like, I don't like getting beat up. This is not for me. And he was like, nope, you can't quit. Can't quit. And which, retrospect, I'm like, I probably shouldn't have played football. Like, now knowing about CTE and everything, probably not. But honestly, I remember my dad being like, no, you can't quit. And I was like, but I, and then realizing that I went on to play football, all through high school, and it's still to this day my favorite sport. I love it with a passion. So, I think if I would have quit, that I wouldn't have that same passion for that particular sport. So, very different, but it's just the stories make you think of stories,
Totally. And that Steven's mention of not all of us are going to make the same decisions. We're best whenever we're living out of who we are, whenever we first, I think, discover that, and then whenever we can live out of it, beautiful things happen. So it's funny that my story was that my dad wouldn't let me play football, and yours was that he made you keep playing football, but they were both like the right decisions for the father to make. So whenever we're talking about all this, I think it's important to go to that level and not look at the actions of the father, but what is happening. Like, take a step back and say, your father knew you and he was looking out for what's best for you. Maybe who knows what all went into the decision. And my dad was doing the same thing, even though those two decisions were the exact opposite of one another.
Yeah. And if you ever screw up as a dad, you just say, well, that's character building. Okay, so that just so you know, if you ever feel bad,
just building your character.
I messed up. I shouldn't have done that. It's character building.
It's not untrue.
It's not. It's not untrue. True. I gotta ask though. So here's the thing, because I know we're talking about dads and stories and how there's all this good symbolism. One thing I want to talk about real quick is, obviously, you can't talk about dads in stories in the hero journey without thinking about how many dads are the dopey dads, in whether it's kid shows or movies. I'm thinking like Malcolm in the Middle, there's these dopey dad characters, and I get that it's a stereotype. Look, when we had our firstborn, someone bought us a shirt that said arms here, legs here, and it was like dad instructions. And it was like, okay, I get it. Right. I get it. I'm the dopey dad. That's my character, which is fun. Because, I will play dopey dad with my kids. Here's where you have to be careful. Okay. They see dopey dad in the TV shows. And then when I play dopey dad at home, I think there's kind of this line that I probably crossed where now I feel like they think I am an idiot. like instead of like, when they're like, oh, what's 2 + 2? And I'm like, 5. And they're like, Dad, it's 4, and like you're playing with them.
This guy?
Yeah. You're playing with them. You want them to know, like you want them to learn. Right. And then I feel like they're just like, my dad's an idiot. Like, I just think there's that kind of level.
They're going
there,
to school the next day saying, my dad thinks 2 + 2 is 5.
What a moron.
And the funny thing is all the other kids are going, oh my gosh, so does my dad.
Exactly. And, I mean, like, think about it. That's a stereotype, right? With the stereotype is these dopey dads. So I will challenge you, other than this list, think of a dad who doesn't fit that mold. And you can think movie, book, but it can't be on this list. Okay. And I'll throw mine out there. I've got a few of them, but my 2, and I'll do 2, is one is the dad on Juno. And I can't remember what his name is, but the movie Juno had Ellen Page and the kid from Superbad. I can't remember his name now. But Michael Cera. Thank you. That dad on Juno. Oh man, if I could be him someday, because the way he handled situations, not only did he have a pregnant teenage daughter, but then he has a pregnant teenage daughter who then is, spoiler alert if you haven't seen this, but then she's giving her daughter up for adoption. That's right? Anybody? It's just me? Okay.
Movie.
Oh, sorry. Man, if you haven't seen it. Okay. If you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. But this is why I'm pretty sure she gives him up for adoption, because what I remember is not only does dad go through this crazy trying time of having a teenage daughter go through her pregnancy, but then also he's trying to play nice with the boyfriend, and who is clearly not ready to be a father either. And at the end, he's not only being there for her and being with her, but he says, I believe, I don't quote me if I'm slightly off, but I think what he says is, you'll be back here again on your own terms. And so what he's saying in that moment, and he's this dad that could easily be dopey dad and go, oh, I don't know what to do with a baby, right? Like, I don't know, it's my daughter. He could easily do that. But instead, he stands there, he stands by her, and he says, hey, I'm here for you, and you will experience it again. You will do this on your own term. And he just gives so much love and so much support to her. And that is a dad I want to be. Like, that is a dad I want to emulate. The other one, of course, is Mrs. Doubtfire. Because yes, he went through a divorce. Yes, he didn't do things right during the marriage. He clearly didn't do things right as a dad, but he learned, right? And Mrs. Doubtfire stood by and said, you are not going to take my kids away from me. No one is going to replace me as dad. And he did everything in his power, whether it's good or bad. He did everything in his power to be that dad and show them that he could show love, maybe in a slightly different way, but he could be who they needed and fill those roles for them in other ways. So it's just, there's a couple of dads that maybe a little off the wall, a little different choices, but those are a couple of dads for me that I'm just like, yeah, if I could be a dad, if I could do those things at some point in my life, those are 2 dads I want to call back to. What about you guys?
So I think I misinterpreted the question at the beginning. I want to clarify here. Whenever you said dads are portrayed in this light of like being a little aloof and everything, you were asking about dads that can be the silly, but you also want to be like, not dads that are the aloof that you don't want to be like. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I chose 2 dads that are silly because that fits my personality. But
I see.
It doesn't have to be.
So you're
dads
just saying
silly.
Just dads not on the list that I want to be like.
Dads that break the mold, because the mold is this dopey dad, right? But dads that say like, you know what, this is convention, but we're a little different, right? So what do those dads do that you can emulate?
Steven, go for it. I still need time to think.
I think the one that popped in my head is not necessarily fits all the rules that you're talking about, but one dad that I think it's a random movie to think of a dad role, but it's Easy A. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, but the Stanley Tucci character in there, not shown very often, not a major character in the movie at all, but a very supportive character in the few scenes that he's in, where he jokes with his daughter and his kids and his wife. And it's very like sophisticated, like humor. But then there's points throughout the movie that he still is there and is still a support system. And so he can be the kind of like like he teases about one of the kids where he was like, "You're adopted? Why did no one tell me?" You know, and he's like, we weren't supposed to tell him. Who told him? You know, and it's like he's a black child in a white family, so it's like it's kind of this funny joke, but like where he's able to like break that kind of like comedic humor and allow that to come into those moments, but then he's also able to play, you know, when things break down and things go south and it gets really hard for his daughter, he's able to be there and be like very serious and take the moment and kind of be able to match the moment, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, be able to be there. That's the kind of dad I want to be. I'm the kind of person that's in the background a lot, but I want to be able to be there when it's needed just throughout the movie. It's like, I only saw him 3 times, but man, that was really impactful. That's kind of how I want to be.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Great answer. And yes, definitely familiar with Easy A. Evan, did you think of one?
And Evan, if you haven't thought of one, I just wanted to reiterate the Mrs. Doubtfire version of Grant. So spot on. I didn't think about it before this recording, but it's so spot on. So you're definitely on your way, my brother.
It was a drive-by fruiting. Never mind. All right. That's a terrible impersonation.
So I did think of one. It's not the best example, but it's the most recent movie I've watched with a dad character that I can think of. So my wife and I watched Cheaper by the Dozen the other night with Steve Martin, and what I loved, we watched both of them, so I don't know which one this was. Oh no, it was the first one. He has this great balance between knowing what he wants in life and going after it, and knowing what his family needs and coming back. So, and he doesn't do it all perfect. He goes too far in one direction and then comes back and considers his family, his very large family, all the people in it, and says, not, you know, to be the best father to these kids, to be the best husband to my wife. It's me, not going after this thing that I've always thought that I wanted. And once I got, wasn't actually what I thought it would be. That's worth noting there, because I think that is oftentimes what happens whenever we achieve something that we've always dreamed of achieving. It doesn't fulfill us in the way that we think it will. But comes back and says, I'm gonna put my family first, and that's me choosing that. Like, that is now the thing that he wants the most. That is now the thing that he wants the most, is to be there with his family, and he wants to set aside the thing that he's always dreamed of the most for their benefit.
That's great. Another great example. By the way, they're making the sequel to that. They're just about ready to start filming that.
Is Steve Martin in it?
As far as I know, and I believe, I was joking around that I think the name of it's going to be A Baker's Dozen, and I'm pretty sure that's actually at least the working title.
Oh, that's hilarious!
Which is super fun. And I'll share. I know I already picked 2, and I'm getting greedy here, but one last one. Have you guys all seen American Pie?
Yes, with Eugene Levy.
It's probably been a while if you have seen it, but if you haven't, Evan, I know you don't have a boy yet, but when you have your son, just keep this on the back burner, okay? Because American Pie, Dad on American Pie, Eugene Levy's character, he is totally uncool, totally unhip, not ever the dad that you want if you want to have a cool dad around. But the amount of times that guy walks in on stuff and sees things that he just shouldn't of his teenage boy. I mean, that is stuff that, as much as that may seem silly and hilarious in movies, I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. I've got 3 boys in my house. So, I mean, it's just an odds thing at this point. You're going to walk in, you're going to see some stuff, you know,
I just hope that boys or girls.
I'm trying
to avoid that at all costs.
You can hope, but let's look, we're dads. We talk about being prepared, right? So this is me being prepared. That character, Eugene Levy, the thing I love about that is he doesn't walk in and shame Jason Biggs' character, right? He sees them ruin a pie. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch the movie, okay? That is, everybody knows about this. So he walks in and the kid's ruining their pie. You got to understand, you could yell and be frustrated and be mad and do that. What are you doing? But it's just a cool and calm, okay. Well, listen, when a man needs and he just like tries to play it straight. And he just is like, look, I see you need some guidance. I'm going to give you some guidance. I'm not going to shame you. And that's that again, another great example of a dad where I'm like, I want that in my life. I want to be able to walk in and see my kids, whether it's my kids taking a toy over the top of their head and about to whack their younger sibling, right? And whether they're about to do that or not, I want to walk in and not yell and scream. I want to walk in and go, hey, so I see what's happening here. Let's think about this, right?
That's
and
beautiful.
That is, and it's a weird thing to think that that's beautiful, but yes, that Eugene Levy character, very underrated.
You framed that in a way that I think made it beautiful, because that's so true. And I am gonna think about that. That's gonna unfortunately stick with me from this podcast, but I think it's a really good.
If you take away anything, take away that.
It's an analogy, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, deal.
The non-shaming part of that is quite beautiful, and I know there's a lot of humor in there with it, but gosh, that's
well, I think that
stuff.
goes back to how we started, right? I mean, the whole of like Mufasa and him not just being like, you're an idiot, Simba, what the heck were you thinking? And just kind of beating him up because he is the bigger person. I've talked a lot about that in my own house is, hey, I am the biggest person in my house. I am the strongest person. I am the tallest person. And do you see me hit mom? Do you see me do that? You know, like, that's not okay. You know what I mean? And trying to kind of, it's almost like me rearing myself, like if I was like some kind of animal or something and being like, listen, I could hurt you, not in a bad way, but like, you got to understand the restraint that I'm using, and you got to mimic that. That's what I'm trying to get you to do. You know, like, it's use your words, do those kinds of things.
It's the strategy in martial arts where you know that you can do the most harm, but you don't do the most harm. You're teaching that same lesson, I think, with that image of just because you can doesn't mean you need to or should or I think that's great. I almost said that's beautiful too. I guess I'm on this beautiful track now.
You are. Hey, you're in a beautiful zone, my friend.
That's all right.
Whenever you
Stephen and I don't get told we're beautiful very often, so this is really
you guys are
beautiful.
Beautiful.
I really like it.
So
that touches my heart.
The example you gave made me think of Schitt's Creek, which my wife and I watch on a regular. Now that The Office isn't on Netflix anymore, that's our new go-to. And which Michael Scott would be a great dad, but I guess he's not really. But his father figure in Schitt's Creek is pretty incredible as well.
It really is beautiful. It is beautiful.
It's great.
No, it's great.
He's a great
Listen,
dad.
I love this conversation we've had today. I really appreciate you coming on here, Evan. I love the idea of thinking about a hero's journey and then applying it to, what I say, like a father's journey, because we are those heroes. We are those, to our kids. We may not be a hero to anybody else, but does anybody else really matter in this situation, right? We live for our kids. We have that love for our kids. We are their heroes. We are their role models. We are everything to them as much as they'll let us be. Right?
And vice versa, right?
Oh man. Yes. You nailed it. That is beautiful, Evan. That is beautiful. Yes, that is 100% correct. We learn so much from our kids every day. And I hope you are learning a lot from your daughter. I hope you're going to learn from your son too. Ooh, I'm so excited for you. This is going to be a
I'm excited to, as you kind of bring the second child into the world. And it's just, I'm only on my third. Grandson already has 4. And so, but I mean, man, it's a beautiful thing. I think like being a dad is an amazing journey in itself. And it's really cool to kind of compare that to the hero's journey and these other stories that are so prevalent in our lives. And so, thank you so much, Evan, for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time. This was awesome. I'm so glad that you're able to do this.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Evan, for coming on. And by the way, anybody that's listening out there, make sure that you're listening, but make sure that you subscribe, rate, review, any of that kind of stuff on Apple Podcasts. All that stuff helps our podcast grow. And if you're like Evan out there and you have questions, ask us. We may not have all the answers, but we are here to help, right? So if there's any dads out there that that might enjoy this kind of podcast, or you know what, even if they won't, just tell them about it. Share this podcast.
Just share it.
Just share it. Who cares? Just shove it in. No, you're right. So just share the podcast. Look, we're here to help. We are dads. We're trying. We're not experts, but we're doing the best we can. And that's all that we expect from dads out there, is that you don't have to know everything, right? We're disoriented. We're oriented. Then we're disoriented again. It happens constantly. But what we are doing is, our goal each and every day is to try to be better men, try to be better dads out there. And that's what this podcast is all about. So again, like, subscribe, rate, review, wherever you can find this podcast. We're at It's a Dad Thing Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, on, where else are we, Steven? Twitter. We have an email. Email. It's a Dad Thing Podcast at Gmail. You can email us questions.
We're on Spotify. We're on Apple. We're almost everywhere you can find us.
We are so popular. It's amazing. All right. So if you want to be one of our 10, maybe 11 listeners out there, please subscribe. Evan, again, thank you for joining us. Where can anybody find you? Is there anywhere anything that can find you? Anywhere that you want them to track you down and find you? Follow you?
I don't.
You got the socials?
I've got a website, evanchasteen.com. That's about everywhere. Yeah. That I show up online.
All right, you got it. You heard that. evanchasteen.com. All right, and remember to follow us on It's a Dad Thing Podcast everywhere available. Dads, thank you so much for joining us. Evan, thank you for joining us. Steven, I see you every week. But again, thanks for joining us. All right, We'll see you guys next time. Bye.